You'd think being born royal would guarantee a soft bed and a silk-curtained cradle, but I'm your bedtime historian, and tonight we slip into a nursery lined with secrets sharper than any blade. A father's throne soaked in betrayal. A mother's whisper echoing down the hallways, even after her head left her shoulders. Why did this little girl survive when so many others didn't? And what did she learn, watching every smile hide a dagger behind its teeth? If you find yourself drifting through these quiet corridors of treachery, maybe tap, like, and subscribe. Just a soft nod to keep these whispers alive a bit longer. Ever wondered what time-traveling court you'd sneak into if you could share your midnight daydream below? I'm listening in the shadows. Now draw the curtains tight, let the candle gutter low, and step into young Elizabeth's waiting world with me. You find yourself in the cramped, drafty chambers of Greenwich Palace. It's winter, and the wind rattles the shutters like a warning. Baby Elizabeth lies swaddled in linen, but the warmth she needs most isn't the hearths. It's the warmth of a court that never truly wanted her, at least not the way they wanted a secure, uncomplicated heir. Her father, Henry VIII, has already sent one queen to the scaffold. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, has been reduced to a cursed name spoken behind cupped hands. And Elizabeth Small and watchful is left to grow in a world where a cradle can swing into a coffin without notice. You watch as Tudors come and go, some loyal, some less so. Each leaves an impression on the girl who will one day outmaneuver them all. She learns early how to weigh a word before speaking it, how to smile at a threat and make it feel like an invitation. There's a rumor among old palace servants that the child once overheard her father arguing with his council. Tiny footsteps, silent as a ghost. Ears pressed to cold oak doors. Some scholars remain puzzled by how much Elizabeth might have learned at such a tender age, how secrets once heard rooted themselves in her and grew sharp. One cold dawn you glimpse her peeking through a frost-smeared window. Below, courtiers wheel and circle each other like hungry hawks, cloaks fluttering in the biting wind. She understands, even then, that survival means learning to fly among them without ever showing a wing too soon. The royal court is her nursery rhyme, but the verses are poisoned, the lullabies stitched with betrayal. You trace her steps through polished corridors, through lessons in Latin and Greek, whispered over flickering candlelight. These languages are more than words. They are weapons, shields, secret keys to locked doors. Her half-siblings hover nearby, Mary distant and sharp as flint, Edward young and fragile, yet more valuable to the throne's hungry eyes. Elizabeth, a girl with no mother and an uneasy father, must read each face, each letter like scripture. Historians still argue whether her childhood loneliness forged her into the monarch she became, or if it was the hidden kindnesses and old nurse's lullaby, a sympathetic tutor's encouragement that gave her the steel to stand alone. In the silence between rumor and fact, the truth is a ghost only she could name. Now in these restless halls, you sense it, a princess in waiting watching the world with eyes too old for her years. Each secret tucked under her pillow like a hidden blade. One day, those blades will carve her crown. A hush settles as the shadow of the Tower of London stretches over your thoughts, cold and damp like the stone walls that once threatened to swallow Elizabeth whole. One breath away from execution, that's how close she came to becoming a footnote in someone else's triumph. Step carefully now through rain-slick courtyards and iron-barred gates that echo with footsteps long gone. Elizabeth no longer a child, stands wrapped in the gray mist of suspicion. Her sister Mary sits on the throne, now bloody. Some will whisper later, but for Elizabeth, the tower's gates swing open like a maw ready to bite. You see her arrive, under guard, the boat gliding across the Thames. She's draped in fine cloth that does nothing to stop the chill seeping through her bones. Some say she stepped ashore and refused to kneel on the wet ground. Others argue she knelt anyway, not to the Queen, but to fate bargaining with the stones themselves to spare her life. Surviving records offer conflicting accounts of this moment. Was she defiant or desperate? No one agrees. Only the tower knows for sure. Inside the walls breathe secrets, damp mortar, whispering servants' guards who watch too closely. Elizabeth learns to listen more than she speaks, to wait, to smile when spoken to. She knows that silence can be sharper than accusation and far safer. In her cell, she scratches idle notes on scraps of parchment, Latin phrases turned over like smooth pebbles in her mind. What she cannot say aloud, she commits to memory. Each word a prayer or a dagger, depending on who finds it. Nights stretch long and formless. Candles flicker, shadows creep, and the air hums with rumors. Outside, the ravens mutter their own gossip, black feathers against a blood-red sky. Some nights, she imagines her mother's ghost brushing cold fingers along the walls, whispering advice Elizabeth pretends not to hear. She dreams of green fields and the laughter of courtiers, but wakes to the rattle of keys and the scratch of boots on stone. You drift with her along the battlements, each step a lesson in restraint, each guard a test of her poise. Did she cry herself to sleep some nights? Probably. Did she show it? Never. Historians like to debate whether this was where her famed caution took root, whether the tower turned her heart to stone or taught it to beat just softly enough to avoid notice. And yet, she leaves the tower alive. She emerges blinking in the pale sunlight, draped in the same cloak, but now wearing an invisible armor no executioner could touch. She has learned that power hides in shadows, that mercy is a coin best kept hidden in your sleeve. As you watch her ride away under watchful eyes, remember the tower never truly lets you go. Its lessons echo down corridors of the mind. And for Elizabeth, those lessons will shape every whisper, every alliance, every velvet threat she wraps in silk smiles. The girl who walked in fearing death walks out carrying a secret. Sometimes surviving is the sharpest blade of all. A hush of candlelight flickers as you follow Elizabeth back to her court, this time not as a frightened prisoner, but as a queen in waiting who has learned that myths are stronger than armies when wielded well. Step into her chamber, where silks drape the walls like painted lies, and mirrors reflect a woman carefully sculpting herself into a legend. The Virgin Queen, pure untouchable mother, to a nation yet wife to none. But beneath the white lead makeup and the powdered ruffs lies a secret pact. Her body belongs only to the crown. It's an image more powerful than any suitor's promise. You see her surrounded by diplomats, scribes, and poets who marvel at her refusal to wed. To marry would be to surrender power, something she knows better than to do. Some claim she simply couldn't find a match worthy of her wit and ambition. Others argue her heart belonged to one man, only locked behind closed doors, and rumors too delicate to survive the light. Scholars still disagree. Was her chastity real, or the greatest performance in royal history? In court, her unmarried state becomes a weapon. Foreign kings and local nobles circle her like moths around a flame, each believing they might be the one to tame England's elusive monarch. But Elizabeth turns flirtation into diplomacy. A wink here, a letter there, alliances forged not by treaties alone, but by the tantalizing promise of what might be won if only she'd say yes. You watch her lean forward on her throne, bright eyes catching every whisper. She praises this one's poetry dances, with that one at courtly revels, and yet never gives enough to bind her hands. It is a dance of veils and secrets. Her ringless finger rules them all for as long as it remains bare. At night, Elizabeth studies her own portraits, commissioned to show not the woman she was, but the myth she wished to become. A goddess in silk, ageless and sovereign, the portraits multiply, sent abroad like royal spies in painted form. Each brushstroke declares to the world here is a queen beyond mortal entanglement. Here is England, pure and strong, unwed and undefeated. In whispered corners of the court pages and chambermaids gossip about the glances she shares with favored courtiers, Robert Dudley, the name on every tongue, yet never written in any marriage record. Historians argue whether they were lovers in secret or simply partners in power. No letters survive that prove the truth. And perhaps that is how Elizabeth wanted it, her private life blurred into myth so perfectly that no man could claim her crown through her bed. You drift with her down the long, echoing halls of Whitehall Palace, where footsteps fade into the hush of history. Each gesture, each refusal to wed, builds the Virgin Queen into something bigger than flesh and blood, a living legend, an untouchable symbol, who turned her own body into England's strongest fortress. So when the next ambassador bows low, asking yet again for her hand, Elizabeth smiles that secret smile. She knows exactly what it means to belong to no one and everyone all at once. She knows that myths last longer than vows, and the myth of the Virgin Queen will outlive every suitor's fleeting promise. In the hush of your own room, the lesson lingers. Sometimes the strongest shield is a story no one can truly touch. Listen, do you hear it? The faint clink of silver goblets, the hushed rustle of velvet sleeves brushing against stone walls, the whispered rumors swirling like smoke in the corridors. Beneath the gilded revelry, there is poison in the air. You slip into the shadows with Elizabeth now, where each meal could be her last, if not for the unseen hands testing every bite. They call her the Virgin Queen, but few remember she was also the queen of hidden dangers, each feast a gamble, each banquet a stage for traitors to play their hand. It begins with whispers. Enemies plot across the channel, courtiers scheme. Behind silk curtains, papal bulls declare her illegitimate. She is excommunicated by Rome, branded a heretic in Catholic eyes, open invitation for assassins who dream of slipping venom into her wine. Some tried with powders stirred into stews or tainted apples. Some never made it past the palace gates. So Elizabeth builds her secret line of defense food tasters who risk death before the plate reaches her table. You imagine them now, unseen men and women, lifting jeweled covers, sniffing nibbling, waiting for the slow burn of betrayal on the tongue. A single taste could buy her one more sunrise. In the great hall, guests chatter and jest. They pretend not to notice the subtle pause before she raises her goblet. She watches their eyes more than the wine. Some say she once caught a foreign envoy's servant slipping a pinch of suspicious powder into a pudding. The truth is tangled. Of course, some scholars remain unconvinced the attempt was real. But the rumor alone did its job. Fear kept conspirators awake as much as loyalty did. Each dish is a lesson in power. Fresh venison, imported fruits, exotic spices all paraded before her like trophies of conquest, but they are also bait for betrayal. One wrong taste, and the Virgin Queen's legend ends at the tip of a poisoned knife. So the kitchens hum with trusted cooks, and watchful eyes the cellars sealed with royal seals. Each meal a testament to the invisible army who kept her alive. You glimpse her at supper, laughter bright as the chandeliers overhead. She passes morsels to favored courtiers, smiles at foreign ambassadors, makes the table her battlefield. Poison can be hidden in a goblet, but so can power. To dine with Elizabeth is to be reminded that she is untouchable by blade or brew. And still, the shadows linger. You drift down torchlit corridors after the feasts where empty platters rest beside dying candles. Somewhere in the dark, a taster rubs his stomach and thanks the gods he lives to taste another day. Somewhere else, a courtier whispers rumors of poisons that never were secrets that tighten Elizabeth's grip on loyalty. Fear, after all, is sometimes more effective than fact. Historians debate whether any real poison ever touched her plate. Some believe the rumors alone were enough to keep would-be killers at bay. Others think failed plots died with their conspirators buried under royal silence. Only the kitchens know the truth, and they never spoke. So next time you sit down to a quiet meal, think of Elizabeth fork in hand, smile painted on secrets swirling with each sip of wine. Every bite a reminder, survival is sometimes a taste best left to others. Lean closer now, past the clinking goblets and whispered threats to the quieter corners of Elizabeth's court, where true power drifts like candle smoke through unseen passageways. Here in the hush between official proclamations, the Queen's real strength lies not in crowns or armies, but in the ears always bent toward her throne. You slip behind a heavy tapestry and find a man you'd never notice at court banquets, a clerk with ink-smudged sleeves, a maid refilling goblets, a court musician humming harmless tunes. But watch closely. These are the hidden advisors, the whisper carriers who turn secrets into survival. Elizabeth inherited more than the Tudor crown. She inherited a world of plots that bred traitors in every shadow. To rule alone was impossible unless you knew every secret before it hatched. So she wove her own net strand by delicate strand. At its center were men like Francis Walsingham, her spy master, her shadow broker, her invisible blade. Walsingham's letters crisscrossed Europe like veins carrying lifeblood back to the Queen. Messages in invisible ink codes hidden in prayer books, cryptic signs scrawled in the margins of innocent-seeming notes. This was Elizabeth's true armor. Some of these methods still baffle historians. Did her network rival any in Europe? Or is that an invention polished by later romantic tales? Scholars still squabble over how deep the web ran. Picture it, a coded note passed by candlelight, a loyal maid slipping word of a traitor beneath the Queen's door. Elizabeth did not rule by iron alone. She ruled by listening. She'd sit late into the night, eyes sharp and unblinking, as trusted shadows told her what no ambassador would dare confess in daylight. Sometimes the Queen rewarded her loyal informers with gifts of gold, sometimes with titles, sometimes only with a nod that meant they would live to see another dawn. A rumor silenced here, a plot exposed there one more day for the Virgin Queen to keep her throne unchallenged. Yet the true genius of her hidden advisors lay in how invisible they remained. Not all wore the mark of the crown. Some were merchants, scribes, or actors traveling from city to city, gathering gossip with each tankard of ale. Some never knew how many layers their whispered secrets passed through before they reached Elizabeth's ear. To the world, they were nobodies. To the Queen, they were the reason she woke each morning still alive. You catch a glimpse of Elizabeth herself, pacing her chamber long after midnight. In her hand, a coated letter ink still drying. Somewhere in the palace, a candle burns low beside a man who will vanish before dawn, his message delivered, his service complete. He might be rewarded tomorrow, or he might disappear into the hush, another shadow folded into the tower's stone walls. Historians love to romanticize the drama cloak and dagger meetings in moonlit gardens, spies with poison rings and false names. The truth, as always, is murkier. Some secrets were never written down. Some double agents played both sides. Some plots never existed outside rumor. And yet the result remains: Elizabeth's crown stayed firmly on her head, her enemies forever guessing what she knew and when she knew it. So as you drift back through these hidden halls, remember, sometimes power isn't loud. Sometimes it hums softly in the ears of those smart enough to listen. And Elizabeth, the girl who once crouched behind palace doors to catch whispered arguments, never stopped listening. That's why she ruled. That's why her shadows still flicker behind every story told of her reign. Step lightly now, for we've come to the part of Elizabeth's story where loyalty turns to iron and mercy is weighed against a crown's survival. You stand in a candlelit chamber, far from the velvet dance of courtiers, where one woman's fate trembles on the edge of a blade, Mary, Queen of Scots. It begins with a cousin's claim, a dangerous claim. Mary Stuart, exiled queen, and a Catholic hope, a symbol that could topple Elizabeth's Protestant rule if left unchecked. For years, Mary drifts like a storm cloud over Elizabeth's reign, letters smuggled in loaves of bread, conspiracies hatched in hushed corners of foreign courts. Each rumor sharpens the knife at Elizabeth's throat. You watch as the two queens circle each other through parchment and spies. They never meet face to face, yet their lives tangle like thorned vines. Mary, proud and defiant, imprisoned in English castle's more gilded cage than dungeon. Elizabeth, cautious and calculating, torn between blood kinship and the threat Mary's claim brings. Some argue Elizabeth pitied her cousin to the very end. Others say the Virgin Queen never felt pity for anyone who dared challenge her crown. Scholars still wrestle with letters real or forged that speak of mercy weighed against treason. The final blow falls with ink and wax seals the discovery of the Babington plot, a conspiracy to murder Elizabeth and place Mary on England's throne. Proof enough, or so her advisors claim. Elizabeth hesitates, quill in hand, a monarch caught between survival and conscience. To sign this death warrant is to stain her reign with kin's blood, but to leave it unsigned is to risk her own. In Fotheringhay Castle's cold hall, Mary kneels before the block draped in crimson, a martyr's color. The axe rises, falls, rises again. It takes more than one swing. Outside, the wind swirls the rumor that Elizabeth weeps at the news that she claims she never truly meant for it to happen so soon. Historians argue over that moment. Was it an act to preserve her myth, or did Elizabeth truly flinch at her own ruthlessness? Yet once Mary's head rolls, Elizabeth's image is forever changed. The Virgin Queen is now also the queen who signs away royal blood to protect her crown. Fear flickers through her enemies. If she'd end Mary's threat, what chance has anyone else? The traitorous whispers grow quieter. The loyalists stand closer. Survival is written not just in words, but in the silence that follows a cousin's final breath. In the court, Elizabeth keeps her composure. Portraits show her resolute pearls gleaming at her throat, no trace of the doubt that may have flickered behind closed doors. She hosts banquets as if no axe ever fell. Yet sometimes, when the music drifts through Whitehall's cold corridors, you wonder if the Queen remembers that moment, if the ghost of Mary's last prayer ever brushed her thoughts when she lay awake at dawn. You follow her now, through those dawn hours, stepping lightly through dreams threaded with regret and resolve. Some secrets grow heavy in the dark, heavier than any crown of gold and gems. And when the morning bell tolls, Elizabeth rises, mask intact, myth stronger than ever. The realm sleeps a little more securely, not knowing what it cost her to keep their nightmares at bay. In that hush, you understand every legend has its price. And for Elizabeth, the price was the silence that followed Mary's head, rolling across a block, a silence that crowned her, not just a ruler, but a survivor to the very end. Follow the scratch of a quill, now dip it in ink, watch it glide across parchment that could tilt kingdoms on the stroke of a word. Elizabeth's court may glitter with jewels and silken whispers, but her truest power drips black and permanent, a crown of ink and letters. Long after the banquets fade and the dancing shoes are set aside, you find her hunched over a writing desk, lit by flickering candles. Piles of letters report secret missives. They are the veins through which her realm's lifeblood flows. In an age when swords win battles, but words win empires, Elizabeth knows which blade to wield. She learned young that knowledge is armor. Her tutors fed her Latin and Greek like bread and wine. She devoured them both, then moved on to French, Italian, Spanish. A queen fluent in half of Europe's secrets. Some say she read Machiavelli late at night, turning pages by moonlight, though scholars still bicker over whether she truly embraced the prince's cold counsel or merely performed its lessons in silk and lace. A scrap of rumor says she sometimes scribbled notes in invisible ink lemon juice, dried into ghostly warnings for loyal eyes only. You imagine her leaning close to the flame, watching the letters appear, like spirits, called from the dark. A coded phrase here, a slip of paper hidden inside a hollowed-out book. She made language her fortress, each letter a stone in the wall that kept traitors at bay. You stand behind her now as she signs her name at the bottom of a royal decree. The swirl of the R in Elizabeth R, a flourish. That means Regina Queen. It's more than a signature. It's a seal of command, a promise that her words carry as much steel as any army's blade. One letter from Elizabeth could lift a siege launch, a fleet, or unravel a conspiracy before it ever left the whisper stage. She surrounds herself with men who understand the power of paper scribes, who cipher and decipher spies, who slide coded notes through palace passages, couriers who ride through storm and snow to carry her voice across the realm. The Queen's ink is never dry. She answers ambassadors with elegant turns of phrase that bend threats into compliments. She praises poets and philosophers in letters that make them loyal for life. A scholar's idea once tucked into her mind might bloom years later as royal policy. One tiny overlooked letter changed history, a coded scrap that cracked the Babington plot wide open. Historians argue whether it was a lucky slip or a masterstroke. Some claim Walsingham staged it. Some insist it fell into their hands by divine chance. What's certain is this Elizabeth knew how to turn parchment into a blade sharp enough to slice through a cousin's claim to her crown. The irony drips thicker than the ink itself. In a world where kings roared on battlefields, here is a queen who sat at a desk and conquered with words. A brush of quill to paper a hidden message slipped under a door, small acts that shaped the fate of an empire. So you watch her finish the night's writing, sealing each letter with wax that glows red in the candlelight. Another missive for a loyal ally, another coded line for a hidden ear. Her crown may glitter under torchlight, but the true crown rests here, black ink on parchment, sharp as any sword, lasting longer than any fortress of stone. And when dawn breaks, Elizabeth's letters fly out into the world, carrying secrets, threats, promises. One woman's mind multiplied by 1,000 scraps of parchment, binding England together with every stroke of her pen. Linger here a moment longer, where the flicker of candlelight softens scandal into rumor, and rumor into power. Behind Elizabeth's composed smile, courtships swirl like hidden currents beneath calm water, secret love's public lies. In the grand halls of Whitehall, courtiers bow low eyes, lifting just enough to catch a glance from the Queen. Elizabeth, ever the performer, knows when to offer a smile and when to let it linger too long. A lace-gloved hand brushes another in passing a fleeting touch that fuels weeks of whispered gossip behind silk-draped doors. Robert Dudley's name curls around every corner, a childhood friend, a loyal favorite, a man whose rooms sat scandalously close to the Queen's own. Some say he was her one true love, that they stole moments alone beneath tapestries and in moonlit gardens. Others claim the Virgin Queen's chastity was unbreakable, that Dudley was merely a mirror she used to reflect her subjects' desire for a royal romance. Surviving letters show tenderness and trust, yet never quite enough proof to silence centuries of debate. Historians still argue over what was real and what was carefully staged theater. And there were others, handsome courtiers, foreign princes, brave adventurers, like Sir Walter Raleigh. Each arrived wrapped in the promise of power if they could win her heart. But Elizabeth, master of the unspoken bargain, knew better than to hand any man a claim to her throne through her bed. She dangled affection like a jewel at the end of a chain, just close enough to keep them circling, never close enough to grasp. One story tells of Essex young and reckless, who dared to break her rules with too much ambition and too little caution. His rise was swift, his fall swifter. You see him now, kneeling before her throne, begging forgiveness for a plot that overreached. Some say Elizabeth wept when Essex was executed, that she mourned the boy who tried to be her equal and failed. Some say she felt nothing but cold resolve. The truth, as always, slips between lines never written. Beyond the palace walls, these rumors serve their purpose. Catholic rulers hope for a marriage that never comes. Protestant lords trust the Queen to remain free from foreign entanglements. The people, meanwhile, gossip about their monarch's virtue, while she quietly turns scandal into strategy. A single rumored embrace could buy her time in negotiations or silence a rebellious noble who thinks he knows her secrets. You drift through the royal chambers at dusk, tapestries muting the giggles of maids and the low chuckle of favored gentlemen. Elizabeth plays the court like an instrument, plucking each note with precision. If one man grows too bold, she dismisses him with a flick of her fan. If another loses his charm, she replaces him with someone more useful. Love at her court is never truly about the heart. It's about power whispered behind closed doors. Yet sometimes, alone by candlelight, you wonder if the Virgin Queen ever envied the simple freedom to love without kingdoms balanced on the tip of her quill. Did she lie awake, wondering what it might feel like to belong only to herself? Or was the myth enough? Did the power thrill her more than any secret lover's hand ever could? So tonight, remember, behind every portrait of Elizabeth's pale, unlined face lies 1,000 rumors half-truths, and deliberate deceits. Secret loves that were never quite secrets, public lies that were never quite false, and a queen who knew that her greatest affair was not with any man, but with the myth she created and ruled until her dying breath. Hush now, lean into the salt air and the distant thunder of cannons. England trembles under storm clouds and foreign sails. This is the hour when Elizabeth's legend steels itself against the might of Spain and the swelling rage of the Armada's storm. Imagine the year 1588. You stand on the chalk cliffs of Dover, the wind tugging at your cloak eyes, straining to catch the first dark shapes of enemy ships drifting across the channel. Spain, rich, devout, iron-willed, has sent its floating fortress to crush the heretic queen and restore Catholic rule. For many, England's end seems inevitable. Yet at Tilbury, Elizabeth appears before her troops, clad in steel breastplate over her velvet gown. She rides among them, not as a distant monarch, but as England's living shield. Her voice cuts through the murmur of fear. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. Words as sharp as pikes. A moment carved into the stone of national memory. Behind the speech lies something quieter, more cunning. Elizabeth's war is not fought by sword alone. Secret letters slip between admirals' fingers. Coded reports map the Armada's movements. Trusted advisors feed her the rumors of Spanish supplies and Catholic allies waiting in English fields. Some claim the storm alone saved her realm, battering the Spanish fleet into broken driftwood. Others argue it was Elizabeth's silent strategies, alliances forged in smoky chambers, spies embedded in foreign ports that truly won the day. Scholars remain divided miracle of weather or masterstroke of intelligence. You drift across the wind-whipped decks with the sailors who fight under her banners. Their cannons roar through rain and smoke. Fire ships set enemy galleons ablaze, scattering the Armada like startled crows. Each boom echoes a promise this queen, this island will not bow. At court, Elizabeth presents herself not as a warrior, but as the calm eye of the storm. She receives foreign ambassadors with gentle courtesy, while her navy shreds the invincible fleet to splinters. Portraits, painted afterward, show her hand resting on a globe, an image of calm dominion over wind and wave. Yet behind the pearl necklace and jeweled crown is the same girl who learned to survive the tower's shadows. The same queen who tastes every sip for poison, who turns gossip into armor. Among her advisors, there is no celebration too loud. The Spanish threat lingers even in defeat. Elizabeth knows victory is never final, only delayed betrayal, waiting in another letter. Another dockside tavern, where spies trade secrets for coin. She dispatches envoys to smooth tense treaties to remind the world that England's queen is not easily toppled by wind or war. And yet for the common folk, the Armada becomes legend overnight. Bonfires blaze on hilltops, church bells ring for days. Children hear tales of storms summoned by their queen's unyielding will. The myth grows, Elizabeth England's mother, England's shield untouched by the world's greatest navy. You stand beside her as she gazes across the channel eyes, narrowed at the waves that carried so much threat and left only splintered masts bobbing like ghosts. Perhaps she whispers thanks to the storm. Perhaps she thanks the shadows who brought her rumors in the night. Or perhaps she thanks no one, because deep down she knows this, in a world of swords and sails, her greatest weapon has always been her mind. So when the last Spanish ship limps homeward under gray skies, remember behind the roar of cannons and the battering rain, stands a queen who learned long ago that storms, whether conjured by heaven or human cunning, can make legends live forever. Stay close now, for the warships have drifted out of sight, and the clash of steel has faded, but Elizabeth's battles never truly end. Slip behind the velvet curtains of her chamber, past the scrolls and maps, and open her jewel chest. Here lies another of her silent weapons, jewels as weapons. To the untrained eye, her necklaces rings, and embroidered gowns are just symbols of royal splendor, trappings for portraits, baubles for banquets. But for Elizabeth, every pearl, ruby, and gilded ruff is as calculated as any battle plan. Each gem catches the light just so, reflecting her subjects' awe and her rivals' envy. Picture her stepping into the great hall, the hush of courtiers parting like the sea before a jeweled vision. The white lead makeup smooths her aging skin into an unearthly mask. The elaborate gowns widen her slight frame into a silhouette larger than life. A crown balanced just so, a fan of peacock feathers trembling at her wrist. These are more than ornaments. They are shields. She knew how to wield them. Pearls whispered purity, the perfect adornment for the virgin queen untouched by mortal vows. Diamonds hinted at unbreakable resolve. Gold chains across her bodice reminded foreign envoys that her wealth, and by extension England's, could outshine theirs. Every portrait sent abroad was a silent declaration. Here reigns power wrapped in silk, but sharper than any sword. Some say Elizabeth demanded that her artists flatter her, shamelessly smoothing wrinkles, brightening her gaze, draping her neck in rivers of gems that glittered with carefully coded messages. The portraits did not lie exactly, they told the truth Elizabeth needed the world to believe. Historians still debate just how carefully she curated this illusion. Was she the first true master of royal image branding? Or did she merely amplify the ancient art of regal display? Gems were also tools of loyalty. A gift of a pearl brooch to a favored lord. Suddenly, that lord's loyalty glittered as brightly as the jewel pinned to his doublet. A necklace sent to a foreign queen might say without a single word, "We are sisters in silk. Let our sons be friends instead of enemies." Even the simplest ring could bear a hidden inscription, a promise whispered from monarch to subjects sealed with gold. Step closer to the dressing chamber, listen to the rustle of silks and the hush of maids arranging each layer of her armor. Jewels were heavy, but not nearly as heavy as a crown that needed defending on every front. Beneath the sparkle hid a mind forever spinning new designs, new gowns, new combinations, new illusions to keep eyes dazzled and enemies guessing. You can almost see her, standing before a mirror, measuring the angle of her ruff, the fall of her sleeves, the gleam of rubies at her throat. A tilt of the head, a flick of the fan, and England's queen transforms from mortal woman to untouchable icon. She does not hide her age. She freezes it behind layers of silk and shine. The myth of the Virgin Queen is stitched into every fold, sewn into every glint of shell gold. Some whispered that all this grandeur masked decay, a monarch clinging to youth while the world shifted around her. Others believed the spectacle was the point. So long as the world fixated on her jewels, her enemies never saw the hidden blades she wielded in shadow. Surviving records hint at both truths tangled together. So tonight, as you drift among candlelight and the glimmer of gemstones, remember for Elizabeth, a ruby was never just a ruby. A pearl was never just a pearl. They were weapons, wielded with every glance, every portrait, every carefully orchestrated moment when she stepped into a room, and reminded everyone that crowns are not only forged in iron, but in gold silk and secrets. Step down now from the high throne and velvet-draped council chambers. Slip past the glitter of crowns and the clink of goblets. Here, in quiet corridors and narrow back stairs, you'll find the ones who made Elizabeth's secrets safe, the forgotten servants. They hover behind every royal pageant, maids who scrubbed the queen's chamber pots, scribes who copied letters by candlelight stewards who carried gossip and garbage in the same breath. To the history books, they barely exist, nameless shadows. Yet without them, the myths you've drifted through would crack and crumble like dry plaster. Imagine the maid who slipped through Elizabeth's bedchamber at dawn, laying out the starched ruff and pearl-stitched gown. She overheard the queen's muttered dreams, saw the ink-smudged letters before they reached the spymaster's hands. Sometimes a soft cough at the wrong moment might change an entire plot's fate, but she kept silent because her life depended on her silence. In the dim scriptorium, you see a young scribe hunched over parchment. He copies coded letters line by line, careful to disguise every loop and flourish exactly as instructed. His fingers blistered, his eyes red. From lamp smoke he carries England's secrets on his ink-stained hands, secrets he could never afford to speak aloud. Scholars argue whether these lowly scribes ever grasped the true weight of the letters they handled, or if they just kept their heads down, eyes fixed on their daily bread. And what of the cooks in the royal kitchens? Remember those feasts you drifted past, those poisoned rumors that never reached Elizabeth's lips? The Queen's tasters, so often celebrated, were only part of the invisible army. Beneath them, entire teams of cooks and scullery boys kept a second watch. A misplaced spice, a pinch of bitter powder, dropped by a traitor's hand, these humble workers learned to sniff out more than burnt pastry. Then there were the tailors and seamstresses, stitching jewels and codes alike into Elizabeth's gowns. Rumor whispers that once a hidden letter was sewn into a sleeve to pass through hostile territory undetected. Some say it's fanciful myth embroidered by later storytellers hungry for intrigue. But stand long enough beside a seamstress bent over silk and shell gold, and you'll see how easy it is to slip secrets where no spy would look. Not all servants were loyal, of course. Some traded gossip for coin. A scullery maid's stray word at the local tavern might spark rumors that flew farther than any royal courier. And so, Elizabeth's hidden advisors watched the servants too, weaving trust and fear into a delicate web that kept even the lowliest broom-bearer in line. It's easy to forget them when the portraits show only crowns and jewels. But in the hush between each royal decree, these unseen hands turned the gears. They wiped blood from floors, burned letters when no trace could remain, listened at doorways when the queen needed a whisper, carried but never spoken of again. Historians barely mention them tiny names in the margins of dusty ledgers. Some scholars debate how much influence they truly had, whether their roles were accidental or intentional cogs in Elizabeth's grand machinery. The truth is, they made her myth possible. Without their tireless, thankless labor, the spies, the coded letters, the poised poison tasters would stand alone and exposed. So next time you see Elizabeth in a portrait serene above the swirl of ruffs and pearls, remember the invisible tide of servants that held her secrets safe. They were the quiet custodians of the crown's deepest shadows, whispers in the walls, ink in the dark, the forgotten breath that kept the queen's secrets from slipping into the hungry night. Listen for a moment to the rustle of parchment and the low hum of voices debating under candlelight. This is where Elizabeth trades jeweled gowns for ink-smudged fingers and becomes a queen among scholars. While courtiers clashed and conspirators plotted, Elizabeth gathered minds like others gathered gold. She turned her court into a quiet academy, a place where poets, philosophers, and theologians argued their verses and theories at her feet, carefully always mindful that the woman correcting their Latin could also decide their fate. Step closer to the long oak table where parchment curls and ink pots crowd beside silver goblets. Here you find Elizabeth, perched on a high-backed chair, a volume of Seneca open on her knee. Latin rolls off her tongue as easily as courtly pleasantries. She challenges visiting scholars to quote Cicero by heart, then gently bests them at their own game. Some say she translated entire works for her private pleasure, though historians debate how many were truly her pen alone and how many polished by ghostly scribes under her sharp eye. You drift among her circle John Dee, the mathematician and mystic forever, half-whispering secrets of navigation and stars. Edmund Spenser, who spun her virtues into fairy queens and fairy lands. Francis Bacon, arguing philosophy between political errands. Each man bends the knee to the Virgin Queen, but she does not bend her mind to theirs. Instead, she plucks ideas like jewels from their lectures, wearing them in policy and poetry alike. It's whispered that sometimes she met these scholars alone in hidden chambers lined with books. Their debate bloomed beyond the formal spectacle of court. A question about astronomy might shift to politics. A philosophical musing might slip into coded talk of foreign threats. No candles burned brighter than those that lit Elizabeth's private salon's rooms, where curiosity was both shield and blade. She was not always gentle in these exchanges. A misplaced argument, a poorly constructed metaphor, such slips could banish a scholar from favor faster than any court scandal. Some envied her command of languages and texts, muttering that a woman's mind should bend to softer arts. But Elizabeth learned young that knowledge was the only crown that could not be stolen, forged, or poisoned away. Beneath the Latin debates lay real power. Her curiosity fed England's golden age of exploration and letters. Maps charted by learned men guided ships to distant coasts. Books inspired laws and policies that outlived their authors. The Queen's library, hidden behind guarded doors, swelled with volumes in Greek, Italian, Latin, and the latest treatises fresh from the presses of Europe. Some scholars still puzzle over how much Elizabeth herself read and how much she performed her erudition to dazzle and control. Did she truly lose sleep over Stoic philosophy, or was each quote another thread in the web she spun around powerful men who underestimated her mind? The truth dissolves like ink in water there, but impossible to separate cleanly. One thing remains certain. By embracing knowledge, Elizabeth turned her court into more than a stage for pageants and poisoned whispers. She made it a crucible for ideas that reshaped England's identity. Through debate and learning, she stood apart from kings who ruled with iron alone. Here was a queen who asked questions no army could answer and built an empire of thought while the world waited for her to fail. So next time you think of the Virgin Queen seated upon her throne of silk and gold, imagine instead a woman leaning over a battered book lips, moving silently through lines of Virgil or Plato. Here, in the hush between conspiracies, she forged a kingdom, not just of subjects, but of ideas that whispered long after the final page turned to ash. Stay a moment longer in the hush between candle and dawn, where rumor curls like smoke around the Queen's shadow. Here in the drifting hours, when sleep slips in and out of reach, you'll find rumors. In the shadows, Elizabeth's secrets that birthed whispers too slippery for history to cage. For all her public virginity, for all the gilded portraits and stern proclamations, Elizabeth's private life bloomed with speculation that never quite faded. The gossip grows bold when the doors shut tight, maids trading tales in laundry courtyards, scribes passing sly notes over tankards of ale. Some say the Virgin Queen was no virgin at all. Some claim hidden heirs suckled at England's breast, quietly spirited away to distant manors raised in silence so the crown could remain untarnished. One name floats above the rest, Robert Dudley, the favorite who haunted her every gaze. Rumors that their bond bloomed into more than courtly affection drip from every page of secret letters, letters long since burned or never written, depending which historian you trust. Did they have a child in secret? Some claim so pointing at noble lines that sprouted suspiciously close to Elizabeth's court children, whose father's name blurred in records. Some scholars dismiss it as court gossip spun wild. Others insist too many quiet disappearances and sudden elevations suggest more than empty rumor. Whispers swirl, too, about young Arthur Dudley, an alleged son who turned up in Spain claiming his royal blood. He vanished from the records almost as soon as he appeared, leaving behind just enough mystery to keep candlelit debates alive centuries later. Surviving documents argue both ways, an opportunist or a ghost of England's unspoken dynasty. You drift with Elizabeth through these rumors, feeling how she turned them to her advantage. A hidden child meant she might not be the untouchable Virgin Queen, yet letting the gossip breathe made her seem all the more human, a woman of flesh and longing. At the same time, denying it fiercely reminded everyone that the crown sat above mortal entanglements. Each rumor, true or false, woven carefully into her myth. Foreign powers tried to use the whispers to shake her throne. Catholic plots painted her as corrupt and unfit. Yet every whisper only sharpened her legend. She never flinched publicly. She faced the slanders with a steady eye and a sharper tongue. If courtiers dared to pry too deeply, she banished them with a flick of her fan, sometimes to country estates, sometimes to the block. Secrets are safest when the cost of curiosity is steep. And the gossip did not stop at phantom heirs. Some said she hid secret lovers among her musicians or scribes. Others swore she sent midwives away under moonlight to bury evidence in the gardens of distant manors. Each tale draped more silk over the iron truth Elizabeth's power thrived on what people could not quite prove. Historians today still sift through half-burnt letters, cryptic lines in court diaries, contradictory confessions scratched in the margins of old books. No scholarly consensus settles the question. Did she truly die childless? Or did her legacy slip through England like a rumor wearing another name? Some insist her bloodline lives on in quiet corners of the aristocracy concealed in plain sight. You stand at the threshold of her bedchamber, now listening to the hush behind the door. Maybe she lies awake, eyes open to the ceiling beams, considering the price of secrets and the power of silence. In her hush, a crown. In her whispers, a nation's myths still murmuring centuries later. So when you dream tonight, remember some queens rule by decree, some by sword. Elizabeth ruled by rumor, just as surely her unspoken children drifting through history like ghosts the tower's stones could never cage. The candle burns low now, flickering through perfumed halls where laughter hides hidden questions. Here, where velvet masks gleam under torchlight, Elizabeth spins her final dance, masks and masks. Imagine stepping into the Great Hall at Whitehall Palace. Music drifts through the air. Like warm spice, the scent of beeswax and rosewater clings to every silk sleeve. Courtiers twirl in costumes more elaborate than any battle standard. Feathers brush ceiling beams. Sequins catch the glint of 1,000 candles. At the heart of it all sits Elizabeth masked not in velvet, but in poise and rumor, watching everything while pretending to see nothing. The mask part, theater part test. Lavish performances scripted to delight the court, but threaded with secret games. Each dance is a puzzle, each jest a coded question. Who bows deepest? Who looks away when her eyes find theirs? Who dares to whisper a truth behind the safety of a painted smile? Elizabeth sees it all from her throne, each twirl of a satin sleeve feeding her ledger of loyalty. Sometimes she joins the dance. Draped in shimmering brocade face, half hidden behind an ivory mask, she slips among her courtiers like any other guest. To them, it is a thrill. Who among them might share a jest with the queen herself? Who might catch her whispered word, a promise or a warning, wrapped in a giggle and a turn of the wrist? Historians still argue, did these disguises protect her from prying eyes, or invite gossip to test her hold over rumor itself? These entertainments were not mere vanity, they were chess moves draped in silk. A mask could distract restless nobles, while spies crept through their chambers. A misplaced word spoken in wine-laced laughter might find its way to Elizabeth's ear by dawn. A rival's loyalty tested not by iron, but by his reaction when the queen's masked eyes met his own. The queen's master of revels orchestrated these illusions with precision costumes, scripts, hidden meanings, layered like rose petals over thorns. Beneath the music and jest lay messages only the wise could read. A character in a play might resemble an exiled duke or a foreign prince, too bold for his own good. A dance might hint at court alliances shifting in the shadows. To the people, these masks showcase the Virgin Queen's wealth and culture. To her enemies, they hinted at how easily she could bend art into armor. To her closest circle, they reminded them that even in play, Elizabeth was never off guard. Some say she loved the charade as much as the politics. That behind her mask, she could taste freedom, if only for an hour to be someone else, to slip the crown's weight from her brow. A flirtation in silk, a jest that carried no decree, just laughter echoing off marble walls. But the crown was never truly absent. When the masks came off, and dawn painted the Thames silver, Elizabeth's eyes missed nothing that happened under candlelight. Scholars puzzle over how much power these spectacles really wielded. Were they clever distractions, or carefully engineered traps? Surviving diaries hint at both. Letters describe nobles, confessing secrets between dances, or being gently exiled after speaking too freely under the mask's protection. Power softens its voice at these revels, but never falls asleep. As the music fades, imagine the queen retreating to her chamber, the mask laid carefully beside her mirror. She studies her reflection, white lead smoothing every line of worry, a crown of pearls waiting to reclaim her brow at dawn. In the hush, she smiles. Another mask played another loyalty, measured. Another secret, tested and tucked safely beneath her ruff. So when you dream tonight, picture her court bright with jesters and dancers, dark with whispers and hidden knives. For Elizabeth, the mask was never just a party. It was her theater of shadows, proof that sometimes the sharpest blade hides behind a painted smile. Let the music fade now. The torches gutter low in their iron sconces, and the heavy tapestries swallow the last echo of dance. Here, where even rumor falls silent, we reach Elizabeth's final veil, a legacy of silence. Picture her in her last years, the Virgin Queen, older now, yet still painted in white lead and pearl face frozen in portraits that refuse to admit the truth of time. Courtiers stepped lightly around her, careful not to stir the hush that gathers like a storm cloud behind every tapestry. The years have thinned her circle, old loyalists buried, old rivals outlived. Even shadows grow tired. Yet even now, secrets breathe between the lines of her reign. You see her sitting alone in her privy chamber, quill in hand letters half finished. Some never sent. Some burned before the ink dried. What did they say? Historians can only guess. Was it regret for Mary's head confessions of lovers, who never quite were hints at heirs, whose names were never written in any parish book? The hush devours the answers. She built her myth on what she revealed and what she buried. An unmarried queen who mothered a kingdom but no children. A sovereign who turned rumor into armor. When the bells finally toll for Elizabeth in 1603, they ring not only for the end of her life, but for the closing of countless doors bolted behind her. Scholars still dig through trunks of fading parchment and conflicting diaries, piecing together fragments that rarely fit. Some say her final days were filled with uneasy silence. She refused her bed standing or sitting for hours, as if sleep itself were an admission she could no longer keep watch over her kingdom or her secrets. Witnesses wrote that she drifted between half-sleep and waking dreams, lips moving in whispers that no one dared lean close enough to catch. Perhaps she spoke to ghosts, her mother, her cousin Mary Robert Dudley. Or perhaps she spoke only to herself, the last keeper of the crown's deepest shadows. When she died, they say the courtiers wept some for the queen. They knew some for the power that died with her. The question of her heir had long haunted Europe. With no child of her body to inherit the Tudor flame, it passed instead to James of Scotland, who would rule as James I. So ended the line of Henry VIII, his sharp-edged legacy handed off not by birthright alone, but by Elizabeth's silence. Her chambers were ransacked for clues, scraps of paper that might unlock the final riddles. Some say secret letters were destroyed on the spot, burned by trembling hands, sworn to protect her even beyond death. Others believe hidden diaries slipped into vaults, still waiting to be found in some dusty manor's forgotten attic. Every decade brings another theory, another rumor, unspooling across bookshelves and lecture halls. Yet, for all our modern curiosity, the greatest secret of Elizabeth's power remains the silence she carried to her grave. The rumors of hidden children, the true extent of her lovers, the whispered confessions of midnight councils. These linger in the hush that follows her story. They feed our need to imagine a queen, not quite of flesh alone, but myth, woven from half-remembered truths. But wait, before we close the book on Elizabeth's silence, let's step back into her court, where even the light was often turned down low. There's something deliciously ironic about a queen whose power shone brightest in sunlight, yet who trusted shadows more than sunlight itself. Behind Elizabeth's radiant portraits and glittering court dances, there lurked whispers, rustling velvet cloaks, hidden keys turning in locked chests, coded letters folded into candle wax. What secrets did they guard? Which betrayals drifted through those torchlit halls when the world slept? Even a monarch with a crown of gold needed agents in the dark to keep that crown steady on her head. If secrets like these tickle your curiosity awake just as you're drifting off, go on, brush your thumb over like and subscribe. Let's keep this conspiracy between us and the algorithm. And if you ever wonder what secrets your own walls would confess, leave a clue In the comments, I'm curious who else is listening in the dark tonight. Now dim that lamp, hush your thoughts, and follow me into the hushed corridors of Elizabeth's secret realm. Step into the long gallery of her court, a place that smelled of rosewater and ink, where footsteps echoed louder than intentions. You find yourself drifting through the palace at dusk, when the courtiers slip away, one by one, leaving behind not silence, but a new kind of chatter, rustles of hidden meetings, behind tapestries, hushed bargains traded in Latin or French. It's the 1580s, an age when England teetered on a blade's edge. Catholic plots, Spanish threats, rebellious nobles, each a dagger pointed at Elizabeth's back. Some historians argue she never fully trusted anyone, not even her closest ladies. After all, she learned early power in daylight was nothing without power in darkness. Here, in these echoing halls, whispers carry more weight than royal decrees. You wander past portraits' faces, frozen in oil paint eyes that never blink, yet somehow watch you. Somewhere behind one of these walls, a spy scribbles a message in invisible ink, a cipher meant for a single pair of eyes. Some say they used lemon juice. Others claim a secret blend of herbs that only revealed its truth over a candle flame. Scholars still debate which recipes worked best, though the answers may be hidden in archives never opened. You pause beside a marble bust of Elizabeth herself. Up close, the stone queen seems to smirk. Maybe she knows that while her court adored her pearls and poetry, her real strength lay elsewhere in quiet men slipping through doorways in a nod, exchanged across a crowded chamber in the secrets that never made it to the throne's golden steps. There's a curious comfort in thinking that for all her power, Elizabeth slept better, knowing that spies and secret keepers prowled the night on her behalf. The same people who gathered in smoky inns and hidden cellars, swapping news of coded letters and traitorous tongues. One night, perhaps a nobleman kissed his ring in a pledge of loyalty. Then the next night, that same ring carried a folded message soaked in vinegar to blur the ink if caught. Surviving records often contradict each other. One clerk's confession might name 10 conspirators. Another clerk, tortured in the tower, might swear the same 10 never met at all. Some secrets outlived even the torture racks designed to drag them into daylight. As you drift deeper into these corridors, you sense the hush that clings to the stones. Spies move like shadows here. Some you see, most you don't. A whisper, a rustle of paper, the muffled squeak of a door. These are the sounds that built an empire from the dark corners no royal painter ever dared capture. Rest here a moment, between the walls that once breathed secrets. Listen. If you hear footsteps behind you, well, it's only history treading carefully by candlelight. Secrets shift shape at dusk, and none shifted them more deftly than the man who watched everyone but let no one watch him back. Sir Francis Walsingham. Elizabeth's spy master was more ghost than man to those who feared him. You find yourself trailing his invisible coattails through the cramped offices of Whitehall, where the smell of burning tallow mingles with the scratch of quills on parchment. Picture Walsingham, hunched over coded letters by candlelight, his eyes ringed with exhaustion, his mind sharper than any dagger. He trusted no one completely, yet built a net of trust so intricate that even today, scholars puzzle over how far its threads reached. Some say Walsingham could pluck a whisper from Rome, twist it in London, and bury it in Paris before breakfast. Others claim he simply inspired such fear that men confessed sins they hadn't yet committed. Step into one of his secret chambers, narrow windowless, lined with maps marked in pinholes. Here messages arrived tucked inside hollowed-out bread or stitched into double seams. A single careless word could mean ruin. Imagine a young page slipping a ciphered letter under the spy master's door, his heart thumping louder than the guard's boots outside. Walsingham rarely thanked anyone. His gratitude was survival, not comfort. In these dim rooms, alliances flickered and died like candle flames. Informants came from every rank: dock workers, maids, noble sons, too deep in gambling debts to refuse a favor. Some whispered secrets for coin, others for grudges. It said Walsingham knew who was sleeping with whom, long before gossip reached the court. A scholar or two still argue whether his reach truly extended that far, or whether later chroniclers gilded his legend with shadows that weren't entirely his own. Listen closer. Beneath the shuffle of parchment and the scratch of quills, you can almost hear the hush of fear that kept his web intact. One slip, one traitor gone unnoticed, and England's enemies, Spain's priests, France's envoys, Mary Stuart's loyalists, would find the crack to slip a knife through Elizabeth's ribs. Yet Walsingham didn't trust brute force alone. He preferred precision-coded instructions, whispered in Latin, a nod in a candlelit corridor, a black-cloaked figure on a rain-slick street corner. You drift past these scenes feeling the cold drizzle that slicked London's cobbles at dawn as messengers on horseback dashed through the city gates, carrying secrets stitched into saddle linings. Walsingham's eyes were everywhere, or so he let people believe. That was his true mastery. Even spies feared they were being spied upon. A barmaid serving ale to drunken conspirators might catch every syllable. A gardener trimming roses might linger a little too long by an open window. Some historians remain skeptical. Could any man really manage such an empire of whispers alone? Or did fear do half the work for him? Pause at the edge of his desk, now dark oak, littered with half-burned candles and curling scraps of parchment. An iron seal stamps each letter shut with Elizabeth's cipher, a wax mark that carried weight greater than a royal decree. Somewhere under the papers lies a list of names, some crossed out with neat final strokes, some underlined in ink that looks fresh even centuries later. You lean closer, tracing your finger over invisible ink only seen by fire. What bargains were struck to protect a queen adored in public, but stalked by assassins in secret? What truths died with Walsingham when he finally stepped into the shadows for good? The candles burn low. Somewhere outside, a clock strikes midnight. In the hush, you realize Walsingham's watch never truly ended. His shadows linger etched in the walls of Whitehall, rustling through hidden corridors that never quite surrender their secrets. The faint glow of a single candle reveals a world most courtiers would rather pretend did not exist, where a slip of paper could topple crowns and a smudge of ink could save a queen's life. You follow the whisper of a pen scratching across parchment, tracing lines that loop and twist into puzzles only a chosen few could solve. These were Elizabeth's lifelines, ciphers and codes that turned the kingdom's fate into riddles of letters and wax. Imagine a young courier perched by the hearth, heating lemon juice over a flickering flame to coax hidden words from a blank page. Some messages appeared like ghosts' lines rising from paper, only when warmed by a candle or pressed beneath a warm iron. Others were disguised in layers of polite prose, benign greetings that, when reassembled, revealed plots to kill or bribes to betray. Historians still debate which ciphers proved most foolproof. Some claim Walsingham's agents invented codes so elaborate that not even their own allies could decipher them twice the same way. Tonight, you lean closer to the table, where the coded letters pile high. Wax seals press tight against secrets. Ribbons curl like snakes around rolled scrolls. The scratch of a hidden quill echoes in the hush. Somewhere in a locked drawer lies a key, a cipher key so precise that a single missing symbol could turn salvation into gibberish. Some scholars argue whether Elizabeth herself ever cracked a code. One rumor insists she once read an intercepted letter in plain cipher while pretending to glance at a love poem. Perhaps it's true. Perhaps it's another secret lost to the grave, beyond Whitehall's stone corridors, in back rooms of inns and candlelit studies. Code breakers bent over scraps of parchment. They stained their fingers with ink and risked their heads with every scribble. One misstep, a symbol out of place, a number miscounted, and a traitor's life might be spared or an innocent condemned. You can almost taste the copper tang of sweat that must have clung to their lips as they muttered strings of letters under their breath. A for B, B for C, shift the pattern, break the line, find the meaning before the dawn breaks. Not all codes stayed on paper. Some slipped into songs, hidden in seemingly idle tunes, plucked on a lute. Others threaded through embroidery, delicate knots, that to the untrained eye looked like flowers, but spelled betrayal in silk. Scholars continue to puzzle over fragments of these woven messages. Were they real or fanciful fables, spun by later storytellers, desperate for a romantic twist? The flickering candlelight dances across your face as you imagine holding such a letter in trembling hands. One moment you're a trusted courtier, the next a traitor with your head on the block. Perhaps you'd burn the letter before dawn, scatter its ashes to the Thames, swear to forget every curve of ink. But ciphers have a habit of lingering buried in memory, resurfacing when least welcome. In some dusty archive locked behind fragile glass, historians have found scraps of these hidden words, cipher wheels, with letters etched in brass notes that bear no sense until aligned with the right code. They sit there, now silent puzzles, that once pulsed with fear and urgency. Some can still be read. Others remain unsolved riddles, waiting for a curious night owl like you to wonder what threat did these pages conceal. Lean back now. Let the hush of parchment and the ghost of ink wrap around you like a blanket. If you listen closely, you might catch a whisper, an old cipher calling your name in an alphabet no longer spoken, a promise that somewhere, in some hidden archive secrets, still hum beneath layers of dust. Sleep easy tonight, knowing even the sharpest codes could not cage every truth. Some secrets slip the lock and drift away on the midnight breeze like smoke from the candle that guards this room. Slip from the glow of ciphers into the dim alleys where loyalty is as thin as a blade's edge and betrayal pays better than honesty ever could. Here, double agents drift like smoke unseen, shifting allegiances with a nod or a purse of silver. You stand in the shadows, now listening to the murmurs of men and women who whispered secrets to both crown and cross, playing Elizabeth's Protestant England against the Catholic powers eager to snuff it out. Imagine stepping into a London tavern, the air thick with ale and suspicion. A well-dressed noble leans in close to a ragged sailor. One works for Walsingham, the other for Rome, or so they claim tonight. The next night, their roles reverse. Some of these men wore fine ruffs by day and blades hidden under their cloaks by night. They attended mass in secret cellars, yet swore loyalty to the Queen at dawn. Historians still squabble over whether these turncoats truly believed in anything beyond survival. Lean closer. You'll hear names whispered in corners: Anthony Babington, Francis Throckmorton, even the shadowy figure of Charles Paget. They slipped coded letters across borders and carried confessions between candlelit chapels and smoky backrooms. Some confessed under torture. Others never confessed at all, even when the rack creaked and the iron boots clamped tight. Scholars remain divided on how many switched sides out of faith, and how many did so simply because gold outweighed loyalty. Outside horse hooves clatter on cobblestones slick with rain. Somewhere a courier gallops toward Dover with a message for a Spanish priest, only to stop mid-ride, tempted by Walsingham's gold, to deliver it instead to Whitehall. Some double agents confessed their sins to their priests on Sunday and betrayed them on Monday. In an age when faith could crown you or kill you playing both sides, wasn't just strategy, it was survival. Inside the walls of Elizabeth's court, rumors clung like damp wool. Who was spying for Spain? Who whispered to the Pope's envoys? The Queen herself understood this double game better than most. She'd been a pawn once her name inked on death warrants when her sister Mary Tudor reigned. That lesson burned. Deep trust was currency and betrayal its bitter twin. Picture a young man in velvet sleeves kneeling before a priest. His lips shape Latin prayers, but hidden beneath his collar lies a cipher meant for a Protestant agent. Did he believe his faith would absolve the lies, or did he relish the thrill of dancing on a blade so thin it might break at dawn? Historians poke at these stories, lifting half-truths from trial records and confessions written under duress. There is no tidy answer, only the faint smell of ink and sweat rising from parchment that outlasted the men who wrote them. Slip back to the tavern now. The same double agent you saw whispering secrets across the table slips out the back door before dawn, his pockets heavier with bribes from two masters. He vanishes into the mist, leaving behind questions that linger for centuries. Who did he truly serve? Some say Walsingham kept lists of these double dealers, blackmail folded into his breast pocket like a second heart. Others doubt any ledger could hold so many shifting names. If you listen to the night air, you might still hear their footsteps, soft, urgent, echoing between church walls and royal chambers. Double agents did not fade with the dawn. They carried England's secrets across borders and back again, hidden in hollowed-out prayer books or stitched into the lining of a coat. Each lie fed another truth. Each truth led to a gallows or a quiet reward slipped under a tavern table. Tonight, they drift through your thoughts. Two ghosts with two faces lingering in the hush, where trust and treachery share the same glass of wine. Stay very still now. Feel the tension coil around your heartbeat as the soft tap of conspirators' footsteps echoes down a candlelit corridor. This is the Babington plot, a scheme so reckless and tangled it reads like a fever dream, whispered behind church pillars and coded in lemon juice on parchment scraps. Here in the hush between prayer and betrayal, you glimpse how a handful of desperate young men nearly ended Elizabeth's reign with ink faith and an assassin's blade. Picture Anthony Babington, a young Catholic gentleman with a velvet doublet and the tragic eyes of someone who thinks treason can be noble. He and his circle met in hidden gardens and shadowed halls, where they vowed to smuggle Mary Queen of Scots onto England's throne and return Catholic rule with a flourish of blood. They scrawled letters and ciphers so tangled they trusted only their bravest messengers to carry them through muddy lanes and guarded ports. You stand now in a candlelit room off Fleet Street. On the table, a letter so carefully folded that unfolding it feels like disarming a trap. Tiny loops and Latin phrases dance across its surface, promising death for one queen and deliverance for another. Scholars still quarrel over how much Mary herself knew. Was she a desperate prisoner lured by false hope, or an active conspirator eager to watch her cousin fall? The truth shifts like smoke through trial records and contradictory confessions. Somewhere nearby, a young messenger paces in the rain, the coded letter hidden in the heel of his boot. If caught, he'll see the tower's dark stones before dawn. But he clutches a rosary in one hand and a purse of gold in the other, prayer and betrayal clinking together in the night. Inside Walsingham's chambers, the trap tightens. He knows every letter before Babington's men do, thanks to double agents, and intercepted ciphers cracked by code breakers half blind from candle smoke. Babington never saw the strings pulling his plot like a puppet show. Some historians say Walsingham baited the conspirators, feeding them just enough freedom to write themselves onto the scaffold. Others argue the plot was doomed by its own clumsy idealism, young men too proud to notice the noose tightening around their necks. Slip into the tower's cold heart now. The conspirators sit chained to damp walls, scratching confessions into scraps of cloth. Babington himself signs away his hope in cramped Latin, each word dripping guilt or bravado, sometimes both. Outside London streets buzz with rumors, Mary's letters, the coded scripts, the promise of knives in dark alleys. You can almost taste the fear in the air mingling with the smoke of street lamps and the tang of Thames mist drifting in through iron bars. It didn't end with letters and whispered oaths. On execution day, crowds gathered to watch the traitors meet their end. A public theater of death, meant to remind England that betrayal blooms fast, but dies hard. Babington's fate was sealed not by swords, but by words, twisted, decoded, delivered straight to the queen he had plotted to dethrone. Some say he prayed to Mary as the axe rose. Others claim he whispered apologies to Elizabeth's hidden watchers before the blade fell. If you stand very still, you can almost hear the parchment crinkle under Walsingham's hand as he read the final letter that condemned them all. Somewhere in the archives, the original cipher sits locked behind glass, a quiet monument to the day ink and ambition nearly toppled a crown, but instead crowned the spy master's legend. Rest now, in this hush, where conspiracies unravel like loose threads in candlelight. The Babington plot may be long buried, but the shadows it cast still linger, soft reminders that sometimes a scrap of parchment can weigh more than a soldier's blade. Slip deeper into the dusk, where courtiers murmur polite verses by day and carry daggers and poisons by moonlight. Beneath the velvet cloaks and gilded smiles, an underworld of assassins and secret poisoners thrived, silent operators who turned whispered grudges into sudden deaths. Welcome to the shadows behind Elizabeth's throne, where a carefully placed drop of venom could do what an army could not. Picture a banquet in the heart of Whitehall. Silver goblets glisten under flickering chandeliers. At the high table, nobles sip sweet wine and trade sly compliments. Somewhere among them, an agent of shadows waits a ring containing a hollow pin, a sleeve lined with a vial of liquid death. One careless sip, and a royal cousin's ambition wilts before the next course is served. Some scholars insist Elizabeth's enemies plotted to slip poison into her food more than once, though surviving records disagree on just how close they came. Step away from the crowded hall and follow the hush down narrow stone stairs to a back room where an apothecary grinds bitter herbs by candlelight. He wears a velvet cap to hide thinning hair and keeps his mouth sealed tighter than his jars of powdered secrets. His trade is no ordinary medicine. This is the craft of concoctions that steal breath in the night and leave no trace but a faint scent of almonds or a curious stain on the tongue. Lean in closer. Among the whispers of ink and dagger stories swirl about small vials passed from trembling hands in cathedral cloisters. A priest turned poisoner. A maid bribed to drip a fatal tincture into her master's evening cordial. Some historians argue these tales were woven larger by frightened courtiers, desperate to explain sudden deaths. Others believe every drop was real, a single sip enough to tilt the balance of kingdoms. Pause beside an old oak chest hidden behind a tapestry. Inside tiny glass flasks, stoppered with wax, their contents so potent a single careless touch could doom a would-be kingmaker. One agent's confession, scratched onto a scrap of vellum, tells of a poison brewed from crushed toadstools and ground glass administered in honey cakes, meant for a traitorous duke. Whether the story is truth or tavern tale, scholars still quibble late into the night. Step back up to the royal court now. A courtier bows low before Elizabeth's lace collar, crisp words dripping honey. Perhaps he offered her a gift, a delicately carved goblet perhaps, or sugared fruits from Spain. Behind the gift, a message, loyalty, or threat. The queen's watchful eyes missed little. She trusted her tasters more than her flatterers, and her spy master more than her foreign admirers. It's whispered she kept an herb garden for antidotes alone, always within reach if the wine soured unexpectedly. You can almost hear the hush that fell when a favored courtier suddenly fell ill. Was it plague misfortune or the work of an unseen hand? In those moments, the polite chatter of the court turned to fevered rumor. A shadow here, a conspiratorial glance there. Sometimes poison did the work that a blade dared not. Easier to blame bad oysters than admit your cousin's ambitions needed pruning. And not all who dealt in death did so for the queen alone. Some poisoners traded secrets for coin slipping from one master to another. One night, an assassin might carry a hidden dagger into a noble's bedchamber. The next, he vanished over the channel, a purse full of silver and a new name whispered in foreign courts. Researchers still debate if these ghostly figures were lone wolves or just loyal servants sent where royal daggers couldn't reach. Tonight, you stand where wine once turned to poison, and soft laughter masked fear. Breathe in the echoes, ink and dagger candle smoke and cold steel. In the hush behind royal smiles, a single drop could change the course of an empire. Slip beyond England's misty borders, now into candlelit taverns and echoing cathedrals, far from Elizabeth's golden court. Here, Elizabeth's agents moved like drifting fog, unseen, unsettling, and dangerously clever. While her court danced to lute songs, these men and women carried coded letters through enemy streets, sipped wine with exiled nobles, and whispered bribes under the noses of Catholic kings who dreamed of crushing the Protestant queen. Picture a smoky inn in Antwerp. Beneath its creaking beams sits a merchant, or so he appears. His ledger is a cipher book, his shipments a cover for news smuggled in barrels of wool and crates of spice. He laughs too loudly at the barkeep's jokes, pays for cheap ale with gold coins stamped with English mint. Some historians argue that such agents posed as traitors so well that they nearly sparked real trade wars when caught. Others claim these merchants were so slippery, their real names dissolved into rumor before their ships ever docked. Follow the sound of boots on rain-slick stones through the alleys of Paris or Brussels. Here, Protestant exiles gather in hidden chambers behind unmarked doors. By day, they sell cloth or teach Latin. By night, they pass letters hidden under false floors and read the latest coded messages by flickering lanterns. A single slip, a door left, ajar, a page dropped in haste, and the Inquisition spies pounce. Some of these agents never made it home. Their secrets dissolved with their bones in shallow graves along muddy roadsides. Pause in a grand cathedral in Madrid. An English agent kneels at confession, murmuring prayers in flawless Spanish, while beneath his cloak, a cipher waits to cross the Pyrenees. Some scholars question whether Elizabeth's web truly stretched so deep into Catholic Europe, but scattered confessions and intercepted letters say otherwise. A tiny handful of these messages still rest in musty archives, ink faded, but the danger etched forever in royal memory. Now shift to a bustling dock in Lisbon. A young courier waits by crates of oranges bound for London, hidden among the fruit slips of parchment tucked inside wax-sealed gourds. The messages tell of troop movements, secret pacts, or hints of rebellion brewing in France. If the wrong dock worker so much as tapped the wrong crate, a hidden note might drop to the pier and doom a dozen men by dawn. Far from Whitehall's polished floors, Elizabeth's spies lived as strangers, always foreign, always vulnerable. Some posed as wandering scholars, others as merchants, or even wandering musicians. Their stories are hard to pin down, buried beneath aliases and burnt letters. One tale tells of a young lute player who charmed his way into a Spanish duke's chambers only to vanish the night before the duke's planned voyage to England's shores. Did he poison the duke's wine? Did he steal a war plan? Surviving records offer only half-truths, leaving scholars to squabble over what really unfolded behind locked doors. Yet despite the risk, the shadows abroad were where the web held strongest. Elizabeth knew well that waiting for danger to land on England's beaches was folly. Better to poison a plan before it took shape, to turn a whisper in Rome into silence before it crossed the Channel. Some spies returned to London, triumphant pockets heavy with gold and news that shaped royal decrees. Others returned in coffins, unmarked their secrets, buried with them beneath church floors or anonymous plots of damp English earth. Breathe in this hush, the sea salt on wind-blown docks, the quiet tap of boots on foreign cobblestones, the muffled prayers of an agent kneeling to confess sins that doubled as currency. This was espionage, abroad, part sermon, part sin, and entirely necessary for a crown that glowed bright only because so many shadows sheltered it from the storm. Wander now into the curious corners where secrets hid in plain sight, between parchment leaves, beneath dusty floorboards, inside the crust of an innocent meat pie, cooling on a servant's tray. Elizabeth's spies were clever, but their messages were cleverer still. They traveled tucked into the mundane, hidden so cunningly that even the sharpest eyes missed them while pouring wine or brushing crumbs from a banquet table. Picture a leather-bound prayer book, so well worn it looks harmless in a noblewoman's gloved hands. She kneels in the chapel, murmuring Latin verses, while her fingers brush a slip of parchment nestled between psalms. To the casual observer, she is pious, yet tucked in those margins are coded promises, names to watch, bribes to accept. Some scholars still argue whether these hidden notes really survived so close to the altar, or whether we've romanticized them to add drama to already perilous plots. Step into a dimly lit kitchen behind Whitehall. Here, pies cool on wooden counters, their golden crusts puffed with secrets. One trusted cook swears the venison inside hides not just rosemary and wine, but thin slips of paper, folded messages slipped into the filling safe from prying eyes. If the wrong pie reached the wrong table, one bite could expose an entire ring of conspirators. Some accounts say the cooks themselves were part of Walsingham's watch, their rolling pins and knives as deadly as any dagger. Beyond pies and pages' shoes carried whispers, too. Picture a cobbler, hunched over worn leather boots, slipping a note between sole and lining, before hammering tiny brass nails shut. The message might cross borders under muddy feet, never suspect. Sometimes it reached its intended hand intact. Other times, a sudden downpour or unlucky step through a puddle turned secrets into pulp. Still, for spies short on gold and long on nerve, it was better than risking a loose tongue in a tavern. Somewhere, a noblewoman sews delicate embroidery by firelight. The silk threads curl into flowers and vines, but a sharp eye might trace letters hidden in those blooms. Messages stitched into hems, veils or sleeves slipped unnoticed from chamber to chamber. Surviving scraps hint at this art of hidden ink and hidden stitches, though some historians caution not every flower held a secret. Sometimes a rose was just a rose, unless it wasn't. Sit for a moment in a dusty scribe's workshop where new parchment smells of oil and glue. A boy delivers a stack of letters, each sealed with wax, each holding a tiny fold in the margin, where another slip waits small enough to be overlooked by any guard too proud or sleepy to check twice. The scribe's hands are stained with ink, but his mind runs sharper than any blade. He knows which pages to double, which lines to misalign, so only the right eyes will ever see the true meaning. Pause in the hush of a candlelit chamber, where a trusted servant kneels to polish boots or pour wine. His eyes linger on a torn corner tucked beneath a goblet. He pockets it with a silent prayer that no one notices the slip missing by morning. Some historians wonder how many secrets flickered out because a frightened page swallowed a message or tossed it into a kitchen fire rather than risk a hanging rope. Elizabeth's enemies learned to check crusts, pages, hems, and heels, but the cleverest messages still slipped through. Even now, archivists find scraps tucked into the bindings of books that survived centuries of royal librarians' watchful eyes. A coded word, an unfamiliar symbol, a smear of wax. Proof that once upon a whisper, spies trusted pastry crusts more than their own brothers. Sit with that thought. Words hidden in pages, steps, crusts, proof that in Elizabeth's shadow world, even the smallest margins could smuggle treason across oceans and back again. Let the warm flicker of your candle gutter low as you step into the dampest, darkest rooms of this hidden empire, places where secrets refuse to stay whispered, and men's tongues spilled truth under agony's iron hand. The Elizabethan torture chamber was not a rumor, but a real and echoing threat humming beneath the polished floors of royal justice. Picture a stone cell in the Tower of London, its air sharp with the sting of cold and sweat. In the corner stands the rack, wooden, rough-hewn, simple in design, monstrous in effect. Its ropes creak as they tighten, turning whispers into confessions and silence into betrayal. Some spies cracked at the sight of it alone. Others clung to their secrets until bone and sinew surrendered instead. Historians still debate how much truth these methods truly revealed. For every confession, scrawled in a traitor's shaking hand, another ended in broken lies, muttered just to stop the pain. You drift beside the jailer, now a gaunt shadow, with keys jangling at his belt. He knows every scream in these halls by name. Tonight, he passes by the cell of a messenger caught with letters stitched into his shoe sole. His crime, treason, conspiracy, or simply trusting the wrong man with a coin and a promise. The jailer leans in, close promises a quick end if the spy gives up his confederates. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the iron thumbscrews must speak instead. Beyond the tower, hidden cellars beneath country manors doubled as makeshift torture dens when the crown wished to keep prying eyes away. A fire crackles in the hearth to drown out muffled groans, while a noble host pours wine for dinner guests, above all, unaware, or pretending to be, that secrets slip from flesh just beneath their feet. Not all Elizabethan interrogators used brute force. Some preferred the subtle twist of fear threats whispered behind locked doors, promises of mercy that turned to ash at the block. Sir Francis Walsingham himself was said to favor subtlety when possible letters forged to bait confessions, family members threatened with ruined fortunes, frozen until a name slipped free. Some scholars argue these quieter methods pried open more lips than any rack could. Others insist the iron still did the Queen's truest work in the end. Pause now, beside a battered writing desk candle, guttering beside a quill that scratches out a last desperate confession. The prisoner's hand trembles, words crooked and half lost in smudged ink. Each line offers names, places ciphers true or false, no one can say for certain. Some of these so-called traitors recanted at the scaffold, claiming their confessions were fantasies pressed from bruised flesh. Surviving court records conflict endlessly, leaving modern scholars squinting at fragile parchment, debating whether truth ever truly escaped these walls. Imagine a woman dragged here too, a maid who carried messages in a hidden pocket, or a wife who overheard her husband's whispered bargain with a foreign envoy. Female spies were not spared the iron's kiss, though their stories often withered in the margins of official accounts. A passing note in a clerk's ledger, an anonymous scratch in a jailer's log proof that the shadows did not care for a lady's virtue when secrets were at stake. As the candle smokes low, you sense the hush that lingers in these stones even now. Footsteps echo, where prisoners once begged for mercy that never came. Somewhere above Elizabeth's court, danced on marble floors, ignorant or willfully blind to the groans seeping through the stones below. Power, after all, wore pearls and silk, but it also reeked of blood and scorched iron. Rest here in this grim corridor a moment longer. The echo of chains, the soft clink of keys, the faintest sigh of a secret unwilling to die with its keeper. These belong to the kingdom too. In Elizabeth's world, even shadows left bruises. Slip quietly past the torture chamber's echo and follow the faintest footsteps to a corner of this hidden web that history often glances over, a place where women cloaked in silk and silence became some of Elizabeth's most elusive spies. The cryptic women overlooked by suspicious husbands, underestimated by foreign envoys, and yet threading secrets through corridors the sharpest men could never reach. Imagine a young noblewoman seated beside a flickering hearth embroidery hoop resting lightly on her lap. Her needle dips and dances, threading not just silk, but messages coded in tiny knots only the right eyes could read. A lady's maid passes behind her head, bowed another pair of ears, another quiet watcher who trades whispered rumors for favors that might save her family's farm or her brother's neck. Historians disagree on how widespread these female agents were. Some claim their impact has been wildly romanticized. Others swear it's only modern prejudice that's kept their deeds hidden in the shadows. You drift through a candlelit bedchamber where heavy tapestries keep the cold out and secrets in. A letter rests on the writing desk, sealed with wax shaped like a rose. Within its folds, a cipher disguised as a love poem. The woman who wrote it learned early that lace and perfume gave her cover no hardened spy could match. To the men at court, she was decoration. To Walsingham or Elizabeth herself, she was a blade hidden in velvet. Picture a laundress bent over steaming linens in a castle's basement. Her hands scrub royal sheets by day, but by night she delivers coded notes, tucked into fresh sleeves or handkerchief hems. She slips through guards unnoticed, invisible in her plain apron, her quiet step, carrying news from one secret ally to another. Some of these laundresses were caught dragged before magistrates who could hardly believe their confessions. Others vanished into rumor ghosts whose names appear only once in dusty trial records before dissolving back into the walls they haunted. Lean closer to the candle's glow and meet the widowed innkeeper, too old for court dances, but never too old to overhear a plot or two. Her tavern bustles with drunken nobles, weary couriers, loose-lipped foreign merchants. She pours their ale, mends their coats, and tucks their secrets into the folds of her apron. Some say Walsingham paid her in silver coins stamped with Elizabeth's profile. Others insist she did it for revenge against a husband hanged for treason years before. Surviving ledgers offer both tales, leaving scholars to debate which was the truer motive. Beyond England's shores, women spies drifted through convents and embassies, their vows or piety shielding them from suspicion. A nun might slip a letter to a passing pilgrim. A diplomatic wife might nod politely across a banquet table while her fan hides her coded hand signals. Their secrets crossed borders in the hems of gowns and the spines of prayer books. Many of these stories survive only as hints, anonymous notes, and dispatches a single line in an ambassador's complaint that the lady in question should be watched more closely next time. And always, these women slipped through cracks that swallowed louder men whole. They knew how to be invisible when the gallows waited for loose tongues. Some carried poisons hidden in rings or tiny keys sewn into bonnet ribbons. Others wielded only sharp glances and gentler lies. Their legacy is hard to hold. Historians still wrestle scraps of gossip from court diaries, letters, and whispered confessions, piecing together a puzzle that refuses to stay still. Rest now in this hush of rustling skirts and candlelight. If you strain your ears, you might still hear them, ghosts in silk slippers drifting down corridors long turned to dust. The cryptic women remind you that not every blade glinted in torchlight. Some slipped between rib cages, unseen, hidden behind a polite curtsy and a half-finished love letter. Ease back into the shadows now, where a different sort of weapon glinted in the flickering light. Not steel, nor poison, nor whispered confessions, but the smooth press of a royal seal in warm wax. In Elizabeth's secret war, forging power was sometimes as vital as wielding it outright. Welcome to the cunning realm of counterfeit crowns, where a flick of a pen and the curl of molten wax could condemn a traitor or crown a phantom king. Picture a cramped scribe's den, deep in the warren of London's alleyways. The air here smells of tallow candles and damp ink. On a splintered desk rests a wooden box, lined with tiny copper stamps, exact replicas of royal seals, painstakingly copied by trembling hands. One slip of these into the right letter, and an innocent courier becomes a traitor. A loyal noble finds himself snared, and a conspiracy flares to life or dies in the dark before it draws breath. Some historians argue that these forgeries were rarer than the stories suggest. Others claim we've only found a handful because the best ones did exactly what they were meant to: vanish into history, invisible as a ghost's whisper. Step closer. A scribe dips his quill into ink so dark it shines like oil. He copies Elizabeth's flowing signature with the precision of a master artist, each swirl so perfect even her closest advisors might pause before spotting the lie. By dawn, this parchment will pass through 10 hands, a bribed clerk, a trembling messenger, a turncoat noble. Each glance cements the deception. Each flick of wax seals a fate. Beyond London's fog, forgers toiled in foreign cities, too hidden in rented garrets, above bustling markets, or tucked behind church walls. Some crafted false decrees, promising safe passage to agents traveling undercover. Others slipped forged pardons into the pockets of double agents about to betray a nest of conspirators abroad. For every slip of genuine vellum bearing Elizabeth's mark, a dozen fakes threatened to poison the fragile trust that held her realm together. Lean in and see the trick that made these deceptions so potent a seal that looked genuine could turn suspicion into certainty. A forged pardon might lure a reckless noble into boasting of treachery he never committed until he did. A letter bearing false orders could scatter rebels to safe houses already watched by Walsingham's men. Some say these forgeries were the crown's greatest quiet weapon. Others insist the forgery was so clever that not even Walsingham himself always knew where the real ink ended and the counterfeit began. Pause beside a cold hearth in a coastal manor house. Here, a forged letter once summoned a gathering of minor nobles, each convinced they carried the Queen's blessing to plot a new rebellion. By the time dawn broke, the chamber was surrounded, the conspirators dragged out, half-dressed their fine plans, undone by a curl of wax that never touched Elizabeth's real hand. Trial records linger in dusty volumes, but the forged letter itself, like so many, turned to ash the moment it served its purpose. And yet, not every forgery served justice. Some rogue agents turned this craft for their own profit, selling false pardons to desperate traders who found themselves hanging anyway when the trap snapped shut. In dark corners of London's taverns, whispers tell of counterfeit seals still turning up now and then, hidden inside old trunks, or stitched into family Bibles, grim souvenirs of plots that crumbled to dust. So rest your mind here beside the parchment scraps and melted wax drips. In a world where kingdoms rose and fell on rumors and trust, even a bit of warm wax could weigh as much as a crown. Elizabeth's counterfeiters remind us that sometimes the sharpest blade isn't a dagger at all. It's a lie, pressed perfectly into paper, waiting to cut a man's throat with nothing more than a royal flourish. Drift now through the heavy doors of England's old parish churches, stone sentinels that rang with sermons by day and conspiracies by night. Prayers and plots twined together in these dim sanctuaries where faith offered cover for whispered treason, and the flicker of a single candle might light both salvation and sedition in the same breath. Imagine a village church at dusk, its walls damp with the chill of English fog. Inside, a handful of men kneel on cold wooden pews, murmuring Latin verses that echo off ancient stone. But listen closer. Beneath the sacred words lies a softer hush, a name slipped between prayers, a promise exchanged with downcast eyes. Some historians argue that Elizabeth's spies kept their closest watch not at court, but in these humble sanctuaries where loyalty and dissent knelt side by side. You move through the aisles where flickering votives burn low. A priest dips his fingers into holy water eyes, flicking to the shadowed alcove where two nobles stand too close, heads bent together over a scrap of parchment tucked discreetly into a hymn book. Perhaps it's a list of safe houses. Perhaps it's an innocent prayer. But in the hush of Elizabeth's reign, every word was suspect, especially when spoken within stone walls, meant to silence suspicion. In hidden chapels across England and the continent, the faithful gathered to hear Mass forbidden by the crown. Catholic priests in disguise offered communion to families who risked their fortunes and their lives to keep the old faith alive. Some of those same priests carried coded letters in the hems of their cassocks, ferrying news of conspiracies and pleas for foreign rescue. Scholars still debate how many truly conspired and how many simply prayed, but the truth often lingers in the blur between devotion and defiance. Pause at the back pew, where a young servant girl sits, head-bowed lips moving in prayer. At her feet, beneath the rushes, a hidden hole holds a folded note, ready for a messenger who will slip through the churchyard before dawn. One story tells of a spy who disguised himself as a humble friar, hearing the confessions of plotters before passing their secrets to Walsingham's watchmen. Whether such stories are cautionary fables or echoes of truth, they remind us that in Elizabeth's world, salvation could turn to betrayal in the blink of an eye. Step outside the church doors now, into the graveyard, where shadows stretch long among leaning stones. Beneath an ancient yew tree, a conspirator waits. Hood drawn, low boots, caked in mud, from miles walked under moonlight. He hands a letter to another figure whose breath clouds in the cold night. Neither speaks aloud. The stone angels overhead hear no lies, but the wind carries whispers through the branches just the same. Elizabeth's agents knew well that piety made a fine mask. Walsingham's men sometimes posed as humble worshippers themselves, slipping into secret masses to take note of who knelt where and with whom. A single, misplaced prayer, an unfamiliar face in the nave, could send tremors through entire households. Some historians claim these networks of watchful eyes saved Elizabeth's crown more than once. Others argue the paranoia they sowed left wounds that festered long after the candles burned out. Rest here among the cold stones and creaking pews. Listen to the hush that lingers between prayers, a hush that once hid so many hopes and so much danger. Prayers and plots shared the same breath in Elizabeth's realm, proof that faith and treason are sometimes only a heartbeat apart. And in the silent hours before dawn, when the bells lay quiet and the candles guttered out, these old churches kept secrets sealed tighter than any cipher ever could. Follow the hush deeper now, away from grand courts and smoky taverns, to an alley where truth beats softly inside a man who has never spoken a word aloud. Meet the silent drummer, one of those curious footnotes in Elizabeth's secret wars so peculiar that scholars still argue whether he was myth metaphor or flesh and blood, beating a quiet warning through the heart of a restless kingdom. Picture him, standing in the shadowed corner of a London street, as dusk drips rain through crooked gutters. He wears a battered cap, pulled low, his drum slung, by a rough leather strap against his chest. His hands, scarred, cracked, familiar with cold and hunger, tap out rhythms that speak louder than any voice could. Some say he was born mute, the result of a fever that stole his tongue, but sharpened his mind until he could read lips and secrets with uncanny precision. Step closer. You'll find him drumming outside an alehouse where plotters gather to swap coded gossip over tankards of bitter beer. His steady beat carries layered messages, 3 taps for watch the door, 2 for enemy, near a pause for safe to speak. To the drunks, he's just a pitiful beggar, earning pennies for an honest tune. To Elizabeth's watchers, he's a ghost in plain sight, passing whispers through steady hands that never betray a word. The silent drummer's legend winds through trial records and folk tales alike. One tale claims he uncovered a planned escape for Mary Queen of Scots, drumming out a warning that sent Walsingham's men rushing to the border before a single hoof struck the road. Some historians remain skeptical, pointing out that records are scant and suspect. Others argue his silence itself made him the perfect informer. Nobody thinks to torture a man who cannot speak what he knows. Pause by the muddy courtyard behind the court, where he waits each dawn for a nod or a coin slipped into his drum's hollow shell. A coated scrap of parchment might ride inside that drum, rattling against the wood with every heartbeat. Once it said, the drummer's silence fooled even Spain's seasoned spies. An agent tried to bribe him for secrets, not realizing his tongue could not be loosened by gold or fear. Some swear he simply tapped out a reply, drum beats echoing down the alley while the baffled envoy fled into the night. Step back and watch him on the fringe of a noble's procession. He taps a slow, mournful rhythm that draws curious glances, but no suspicion. Behind him, Walsingham's men blend with the crowd, ears tuned not to the royal speeches, but to that quiet drum, a pulse that says, "Safe watch run." His silence turned him into a shadow more trusted than any golden-tongued informer. When he died, if he ever lived as claimed his passing, left no mark but a handful of rumors, and an old drum cracked and dust-caked that some say rests in the tower's archives. Scholars argue over whether it's genuine or a relic propped up by storytellers, desperate for a ghostly detail to haunt the footnotes. Yet when they tap its skin, even now, the faint thrum echoes like a heartbeat in a kingdom that once slept with secrets pressed tight against its spine. Breathe here beside the memory of a man who spoke only through wood and taut skin. Let your ears catch the hush that hums through London's stones, echoes of a mute informant who turned silence into a weapon sharper than any blade. In Elizabeth's realm, even a single drumbeat could drown out the loudest treason, carrying secrets softly through the darkness, while the world above pretended not to listen. Follow the hush through the final passages of Elizabeth's reign, where the glow of her golden age began to flicker, and secrets, once so carefully spun, began to fray like old silk. This was the death of secrets, when the spy master's web grew brittle, when coded letters slipped through careless fingers, and when even shadows seemed weary from too many whispered betrayals. Picture the Great Hall at Richmond Palace in the late 1590s. Elizabeth sits upon her throne, older now, her once glorious red hair hidden under jeweled wigs, her sharp eyes dulled by worry and loss. Around her, the loyal men who once guarded every corridor of her secret world are gone or fading. Walsingham, the spy master who pulled so many strings in the dark, has been dead for years. His absence left a hush in the palace halls no new minister could quite fill. Step softly into Whitehall's dusty chambers, where the cipher clerks once bent over scrolls deep into the night. The candles still flicker, but the scribes' quills scratch less urgently. Some of the best code breakers have drifted away retired, banished, or simply dead from the fever that swept London's narrow streets. Historians disagree on whether Elizabeth's later spy masters lacked Walsingham's ruthless brilliance, or whether the age itself had simply tired of shadows. Whatever the truth, the kingdom's hidden arteries pulsed weaker by the year. You wander through a hallway lined with portraits, faces frozen in oil, smug with the certainty of power that once felt eternal. Yet outside those painted frames, new threats rose in forms no cipher or double agent could stop an aging queen. With no clear air, a court riddled with rivalries, too tangled for any single watcher to untangle. Some spies turned on each other, selling half-truths for gold or favor from the next likely king. The code books gathered dust in drawers that hadn't been opened in years. In taverns, once thick with secret watchers, the gossip now turned bold, almost careless. A slip of the tongue here, a drunk boast their plots and loyalties that would have summoned the rack in Walsingham's prime, now drifted free like smoke from guttering candles. Some say Elizabeth herself no longer trusted her watchers, as she once had, suspecting every informant of double-dealing every cipher, of concealing more than it revealed. Pause in the tower, where iron gates once clanged shut on traitors snared by hidden ink. Now, the cells stand empty more nights than full. The rack sits unused in the dark, its ropes rotting from disuse. The whisper that once carried terror through the court Walsingham's men are watching fades into memory as foreign envoys test England's weakened vigilance with bribes and half-sincere promises. Yet not every secret slipped into the light. Some knots refused to unravel. Letters vanished into hidden drawers never found. Names of informants disappeared from royal ledgers, their fates sealed in shadows historians still pick at like stubborn scabs centuries later. Did some double agents walk free into the next reign under new names? Did coded pages drift away in a courtier's trunk, only to rot in attic trunks no scholar has yet uncovered? Elizabeth herself felt this loosening. Her final days were spent pacing, echoing chambers, too restless for sleep, too proud to admit her hold on secrets had thinned. She died surrounded by loyal courtiers who wore velvet and pearls, yet whispered behind closed doors about the uncertain dawn that waited once her eyes closed for good. So sit here in the hush of her final watch, where the last embers of her hidden empire glow dimly under the weight of time. The death of secrets was no thunderclap, but a sigh that drifted through palaces and prisons alike, promising that every web, however clever, must one day unravel when the hand that spun it is gone. Now linger at the frayed edge of this secret world, where shadows stretch into silence and the living turn to dusty footnotes in someone else's history. These are the legacies in shadow, the scraps of riddles, the trails gone cold, the ghostly footprints left by Elizabeth's spies long after their final coded letter crumbled to ash. Picture a musty archive deep in London, where scholars stand hunched under flickering lamps, leafing through parchment so fragile it flakes beneath their fingertips. Here and there, they find oddities, half-burned letters, mismatched ciphers, with no keys, names scratched out in furious ink. A spy master's ledger lists payments to men and women whose identities remain stubborn blanks. Some historians swear these gaps were deliberate secrets meant to die so completely they would never betray the queen who trusted them. Others wonder if the chaos of Elizabeth's final years simply buried these names by accident, lost under piles of new plots and newer kings. Slip now into a country manor, its chimneys, cold its windows, sagging with age. In a locked trunk, beneath a rotting floorboard, rests a bundle of yellowed papers, unsigned, unsealed, and undeciphered. Perhaps they are shopping lists, but one line written in hurried Latin matches a phrase once found in Walsingham's surviving ciphers. A ghost of a clue. A thread no one has yet tugged free. How many more lie hidden, waiting for a curious historian with steady hands and too many sleepless nights walk among the gravestones of forgotten couriers and code breakers? No grand tombs for these shadows, just soft earth and weathered stones, names half remembered, if at all. Beneath one crooked marker lies a clerk who died under mysterious circumstances a week after the Babington conspirators fell. Some say he carried the last cipher key. Some say he was simply in the wrong place, at the wrong time. The truth, like his bones, sleeps quietly, wrapped in the damp hush of English soil. Peer into dusty church ledgers, where the faintest notes reveal rumors of a washerwoman who vanished the same night a crucial letter crossed the channel. No trial, no grave, no confession, only a single scribbled line in the margin, paid discreetly. Paid by whom? For what? A hush that never speaks its whole tale. Some of these shadows still tug at modern imaginations. Cryptographers pore over faded lines, hunting for patterns that refuse to align. Genealogists trace family trees, hoping to link a distant ancestor to a ghostly agent whose code name survives in one surviving slip of parchment. Rarely do these trails lead to certainty, yet the thrill of the maybe keeps the shadows alive, flickering just beyond the reach of the waking world. And what of the secrets that never left a trace at all? The whispered bargains traded in locked bedchambers. The poison recipes passed hand to hand, then swallowed down with the final sip of wine. The silent women who carried inked scraps and corset hems, the mute drummer, whose beat may have signaled the death of a plot no one remembers to this day. These legacies linger not in books, but in the air stories you can almost hear if you sit quietly long enough, letting the wind rattle old windows and the echoes of hidden footsteps stir the dust. So settle here at the edge of this shadowed kingdom. Listen for the secrets that still breathe through the tower's stones, the cipher wheels that might yet spin again, if only the right hands turned them. Elizabeth's spies are gone, their trails grown cold, but their whispers remain tucked inside the folds of forgotten letters, murmuring through the dreams of anyone curious enough to follow where the candlelight ends. And in this hush, with every secret unspooling softly back into darkness, you realize that the best mysteries never quite close the door behind them. Close your eyes now, and let these old shadows fade into the warm hush of sleep. The codes, the poisons, the whispered prayers in candlelit chapels all slip gently back into history's locked boxes, leaving only the softest echoes to hum you toward rest. Imagine a last page, folded shut, a final letter, tucked away in a drawer no one will open tonight. Breathe slowly, drifting through corridors that no longer hide spies behind curtains or secrets in crusty pies. Let your thoughts wander past velvet sleeves and hidden blades beyond cracked drums and forgotten cryptic women until they settle like parchment dust on shelves that no longer whisper. May the hush of lost secrets keep your dreams safe from sharp daggers and sharper tongues. And if you wake before dawn, smile, knowing some mysteries prefer to stay hidden, curled up with you in the quiet hours before morning.